All right. Is everybody ready? So before I start my time, congratulations for making it to finals. You ready? Judges ready? All right. Time starts now. So my partner and I are proud to affirm the resolution that, on balance, Donald Trump's presidency has done more harm than good. So before we really get into the nitty-gritty of the round, let's go over some framework. So we believe the definitions are generally contextual. However, we believe that the best way to evaluate what is harm versus good is through a lens of net benefits using utilitarian calculus. I think this is probably very fair. Let's jump right into the contentions because there's definitely a lot to go through. The first contention is going to be that of economic impacts that Trump has had. The claim here is that Trump has single-handedly ruined our country's economy, at least not right now, but definitely in the long term. The first warrant here is that Dow hit its lowest point in 6 years, 2 days after Trump was elected. That actually indicates that investors were very inconfident in Trump's election, and that shows that investors are not very confident in Trump's presidency. But the second warrant here specifically is that Trump's mortgage income tax reform screws over the American housing market, because it de-incentivizes people from buying houses. And what does that mean? The last time we had a housing crisis, it wasn't very pretty. Remember '08? That's what happens when people mess with the housing market. And Trump specifically is passing legislation that is non-Republican, but Democrats don't like it because it's Trump. And generally, no one really likes this kind of policy. But the third warrant here is that the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, downgraded the U.S. economy after Trump was elected. And the worst part about this is that the IMF is a U.S. organization. So a U.S. organization is literally looking at Trump's economic policy and saying that the U.S. economy isn't doing that well, which is pretty indicative. But the fourth point here specifically is that financial markets reacted terribly to Trump's travel ban. According to Forbes, foreign investment 2 days after the travel ban literally plummeted. It hit its lowest point that it had seen in over 6 months since that time, which indicates that even his policy after he's been elected is having very, very detrimental impacts on investors. The fifth warrant here is that the pipeline construction, the Dakota Access Pipeline, actually killed the U.S. steel market, because in order for Trump to pass that policy, the agreement he had to make with TransCanada is that they would use Canadian steel for the pipelines, which means all the American steel jobs that we thought we would be creating by the pipelines were actually screwed, and all we got was the terrible environmental impacts, which I'll be getting into later. The sixth warrant is that CNBC found that consumer sentiment rose to a 7-month high after Trump was elected because he's just generally an interesting person that not many people like, right? Like, no one really likes Trump. They're kind of just like, he's president, and so, well, no one really likes him. Consumers don't like him. That's really bad. What are the impacts here? So when we see that there's a lack of foreign investment, our own, the IMF is literally saying the U.S. has a bad economy, and we're losing steel jobs that are harming the economy, this all results in a negative feedback loop where consumers are not spending money because they're not confident in Trump's economy, which means businesses are not growing. And generally, what we see is that if there's low consumer confidence in 2017, there are detrimental economic impacts in 2018 and 2019. And many Forbes economists already state that we're impeding an economic collapse because of things like the student debt bubble, things like another housing crisis that's happening right now. There's a lot of things that are pushing our economy to the edge. And Trump is going to be doing more harm than good, has already done more harm than good to our economy just by the policies he's already passed. But secondarily, more importantly, I'd say, are these social issues. We would argue that Trump has embraced rhetoric and policy that has otherized anyone that is not a white cis male. The first warrant here is that of anti-blackness. Trump is reinstating things like the stop and frisk policy, which perpetuates a discriminatory mindset against the black body. Also, he didn't reprimand the KKK or anyone in the Charleston riots against the black body. And secondarily, after Trump was elected, something that was spray painted in North Carolina was Black lives don't matter and neither does your vote. After he was elected, this kind of rhetoric that is being endorsed by Trump, to the extent in which he's not saying or he's not condoning this kind of action, is one in which he's kind of insinuating that this kind of action is okay, which is generally bad for our society. But the second warrant here is that of feminism. Trump has, normalized rhetoric like grab them by the pussy, which is specifically bad. After Trump was elected, literally 5 days after, it became one of the most trending hashtags on Twitter, which is only indicative that his kind of culture, right, him being elected as president, is already doing things that is terrible for our society. But the third argument is that of queerness. Our argument here specifically is that Trump and other Republicans will gladly overturn Uberfeld versus Hodges, which dismantles the national same-sex marriage laws, which means that not only is he being discriminatory against black folk and females, but he's also discriminating against the queer body. What's up?
Ban transgenders.
He's also banned transgender people from the military. If that is not indicative of the negative social impacts of Trump being president, I don't know what is. The impacts here, we say, is that the president has a moral obligation to act as a moral leader for this country. his rhetoric specifically the lack of indictment of the people who are specifically supporting him and doing things like saying grab them by the pussy and like writing things like Black Lives don't matter and neither does your vote on walls after Trump was elected is probably something that is very, very bad. But secondarily, we say that this has impacts on a very ontological level. People who are seeing these signs, right, it kills their value to life, because when you are said that you are not as good as another human being, right, when there is a construction of a human being, and Trump and other politicians are saying that you are not equal to this human being, ultimately puts you inferior, and this inferiority kills value to life, which is a very, very big impact that most people do not think of when we think of referring to social issues. This is going to be very, very bad. Moving on to our third and final contention, which is that of the environment. The thesis of this point is that Trump has dramatically shifted U.S. environmental policy in a critically dangerous way, and we have a couple warrants. The first warrant is the Dakota Access Pipeline. Trump has approved the pipeline, and it runs through and violates Standing Rock Sioux Tribe's land. But secondarily, he promised that the environmental impacts the jobs that we create and the benefits to our economy that we get from the steel industry would outweigh the environmental impacts. But looked at the fact that he literally just ended up taking Canadian steel. So the only thing we got stuck with was the 13 leaks that have already happened on U.S. soil, which means that this kind of pipeline is already detrimenting our environment, and we are literally getting no economic benefit out of it. But the second argument is that of methane emissions. Trump revoked the EPA's requirement that companies report methane emissions, which means that now companies don't necessarily have to do that, which means sure they have to report carbon dioxide, but methane is 10 times worse than carbon dioxide, and methane rates into the atmosphere have substantially increased since Trump's presidency. We argue that Trump's revoking limits on methane emissions on public land results in more methane. By I think this is 66% since it was his election. The third warrant is that of coal. Trump lifted the freeze on giving permits for building coal-fired power plants at near at-risk populations of people and like societies. Our argument here specifically is that the fact that there are permits now to build coal-fired power plants near disenfranchised populations is specifically bad. Not to mention fourth warrant here is that Trump literally pulled out of the Paris Agreement, in which a bunch of international countries agreed to benefit the environment. What are the impacts here? Global warming is an international problem that is affecting us. We're almost at the point of no return. Scientists say that after 440 parts per million, we will not be able to come back, and we're at 400, which means the policy that Trump is passing is detrimenting the environment. If the environment collapses, the human race will follow, which means this is a high magnitude impact. And for all these reasons, we urge a strong affirmation vote on the relatively true resolution that Trump has just generally done more harm than good to the United States. Thank you. No.
Okay, before I begin, thank you all for being here, even though you're forced to.
What's the order?
So I'm going to start with framework. I'll spend 5 seconds on that. Then I'll go into our own contentions, and then I'll go over yours. Okay.
Make me say.
Yeah, I'm going to start on framework, and then I'm going to go to ours, and then yours. You got it?
Yep.
Okay. Hello, I'm Oliver Shulman. I'm just going to go into things. So, first of all, on our side of the house, we would like to state what we're going for here. So, we believe the last 6 months of Donald Trump's presidency has had a lot of bad short-term effects, but we believe some good can come from something good can come from something bad, and all the long-term effects that we're going to bring up completely outweigh all of the everything on their side of the house, and therefore we can pretty much concede the majority of their case and still win. So, I'm going to go into our 3 main contentions. So first of all, Donald Trump has exposed the shortcomings in the U.S. political system. So first of all, the Electoral College. People are not okay with people getting Hillary Clinton getting the popular vote and Donald Trump still winning the presidency. This is just one of many examples of people seeing the inherent problem in the political system. Someone with no political experience got in and just played the political system. They just played it. This shows inherent problems in the parties themselves and in our voters, okay? When we're able to have somebody step into place and be able to just play our political system without any sort of no, I'm not going to take your power. with no sort of precedent, with no sort of political experience, and just go with our political system, then this changes the minds of what we believe in our Senate House, and this calls for reform. People after this will fundamentally believe that we need some sort of reform. We have to reform the Republican and Democratic parties. We have to reform the electoral college system, and fundamentally, this is going to create change. Now, why do we care? Well, we believe any sort of change, whether this is towards to create a better democratic system, or more towards a communistic system, or towards anarchy, is fundamentally better for the status quo. So first of all, why would we want this? Well, if we have a system towards communism, this would distribute wealth. We wouldn't have a lot of the problems we currently have with impoverished people and minorities being specifically hurt by this issue. If we had an anarchical society, we wouldn't have violation of liberty, and we would have a lot more benefits, okay? And literally any one of these things, if we reformed the democratic system, or if we went more towards an anarchical or a communistic system, any one of these would be better. Any one of these would be better for our entire government, and therefore, this changes the entire course of human history, okay? This is the biggest nation in the entire world, the most important one that pretty much polices what every single country does in the world, and this is changing fundamentally what we do with our government. This is changing the reform of our entire democratic system. This pokes holes in our entire problem, and Donald Trump extenuated that. He walked in, showed us every single problem with the presidency, every single problem with our government, and we can obviously see why we need to change things. Yes?
Oh, thank you. So who do you think is going to have bigger guns? The rich white folk after the anarchic collapse, or the poor people who have been disenfranchised by the rich white folk? Who would survive in a fight?
Okay, you can sit down. So first of all, we believe in an anarchical, in a economic collapse, in a democratic collapse, where we change over to a system, with that kind of system, we would not have these problems with liberty. If we had moved over to a true anarchy, these would not be the problem. We are looking for reform, people. We are looking for something changing in our democratic system, and my partner will go further into this, and how this will cause change the next couple hundred years, and how this will heavily affect more than any of the impacts brought up by our opponents. Going to our second contention, this changes the mind of voters. More people than literally all time are talking about politics. Think about it. People are openly discussing politics, just generally speaking. Almost every single day, we get news, and we talk about it. We talk about what happened at the White House today. This has never happened before. People are openly discussing the morals of the president. People are uniting underneath this front that what he's doing is fundamentally bad, and this unites U.S. morals. This unites what people believe in U.S. morals. This ends up to a more educated voters. This leads to people having less trust in systems that are anti-establishment, and seeing that there's no way that people like Donald Trump will ever actually be able to get things done. And people believe in anti-establishment is why he got elected. He's a disruptive candidate. People are obviously seeing that this will never happen. Another politician that comes up that is a disruptive candidate, everyone will be realist. They'll say, we do not want another Donald Trump, and therefore Donald Trump, as a disruptive candidate, has disrupted the idea of having more of these people. The people are going to be more realist. They're going to say, what if we have another Donald Trump? Think about it. Next time you vote, that is what every single person is going to think. What if we have another Donald Trump? And therefore, they're going to make a more educated vote, a more realistic vote. Even people that think anti-establishment will go, no matter what, if I vote for one of these other candidates, I will make the wrong decision. Okay? This is more rationalized voters. These are people united underneath this front, where pretty much everybody knows what the president is doing wrong. He's a broken moral compass. We are all united that what Donald Trump is doing is wrong. He's the lowest approval rating of a president in the United States, and we can basically agree that people are united under these U.S. morals. Then finally going to our third contention about Donald Trump has strengthened the advocacy in the world. So if people united underneath Donald Trump, what will this do? Well, so first of all, this is creating a new generation of people that are fighting underneath the advocacy against him. This has joined groups like LGBTQ groups, against feministic groups, Black Lives Matter. All of them are pretty much cooperating against Donald Trump. Now, a lot of these groups beforehand did not see eye to eye, but now they're collaborating against Donald Trump, and this moving forward makes all these groups that are currently being oppressed, all of them work together to actually fundamentally take down Donald Trump. Countries are coming together to try to stop what he is doing. So my partner will go further into this and why this has impact the next couple hundred years, and this sets a precedent of everybody coming together, such as senators, such as all these different advocacy groups, and how this will change the world. So now I'm going to go into my opponent's contentions. So overall, I'm in protected time. So overall, when I talk about my opponent's contentions, we can pretty much say, even if you fundamentally believe in every single one of them, we still win this debate. There are impacts with our government for the next couple hundred years. These are minority groups being able to come out of the shadows and actually move towards equality. This is our government getting rid of the problems that we fundamentally see. We are actually stepping out of these small economic impacts that will only last, as even our opponents agree, 2017, 2018, 2019. We're talking the next couple hundred years. The impacts that will affect us forever as an entire human race. These impacts completely fall as our significant impacts are much more important than any economic crisis they think will happen. They said we're on breaking point for environmental, for example. We've been saying that we're on the brink for the last couple years, okay? We believe that any environmental impact they have is inevitable, and therefore Donald Trump's presidency has not made a difference to this. So all their points on economics, all their points on otherizing, all their points on the pipeline, we believe we've proved that he's not otherizing because groups are coming together and impoverished. We believe that these environmental impacts and economic impacts fall. So on our side we have much stronger and more significant impacts. Thank you.
Hey, Devin, are you going neg, gov, or what?
Neg and then app.
Great.
What was your second contention?
Second contention
Changes voters' minds.
Change in the mind of the voters.
Yep.
My head is cut off.
You what? Your head's
Okay.
That's the best part.
Great. Fantastic. Everybody ready? With that, I'm going to start my time. Now, their first off-case position is that of politics. They have three warrants here. The first warrant is that basically Trump exposed a problem with the Electoral College. All I have to say is LOL. No, this is not the first time a problem with the Electoral College was exposed. Look at the example of Bush v. Gore. That definitely exposed problem with the Electoral College a lot longer before the election between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Like, LOL. No. Two, they talk about how people now believe we need reform. First, there's no warrant. Give me the statistics about the polling. Give me the polling statistics about why people think we need reform. Two, turn this argument. People now believe in the alt-right movement. Look at the example of Charlottesville. People are being way, way more politically polarized. To the far left, look at the example of Antifa. Look at the example to the far right of the Charlottesville protesters. David Duke supports Trump, so the KKK supports Trump. People are now going to the KKK. No. Three, they said this Trump is going to cause communism and anarchy and the collapse of the capitalist society. First, communism is terrible. There has been no successful or good implementation of communism. Look at the examples of Cuba, Vietnam, China, Russia, and almost every country that has ever implemented communism. Look at the examples of Venezuela. Look at the examples of Colombia. Look at the examples of Argentina and Chile. Communism has never been implemented well because in order to create communism, capitalism has to transition between capitalism, socialism, and communism. And in the transition period between socialism and communism, a dictator is required to reorganize society, and the dictator always abuses power. Two, anarchy is bad because there's no social services like medicine and things like that. People don't have access to Ebola vaccines. People don't have access to flu vaccines under anarchy. They ignore all of this. No, anarchy is terrible. Gut check that. Three, this is never, ever, ever going to happen. No revolution will ever be successful against the United States federal government because it's the most powerful military of all time. Furthermore, any revolution that ever happens will just end up in the success of the white society more and more because Chris makes the analysis in the POI that white society will have more guns, more resources. So after anarchy, after communism is implemented, they'll simply control all the masses. Two, they talk about how this changes the minds of voters. Number one, they talk about people are uniting. LOL. People are not uniting. People are being more and more polarized. Look at the example of Charlottesville. David Duke. Look at the example of Antifa. Two, they talk about how people are listening. What? They talk about people are listening to news a lot more. Judge, after the first black president was elected, we listened to a lot of news. After the first orange president was elected, we listened to a lot of news. After a president is elected, we listen to news because we're interested in what that new president is doing. This is not unique. 3, they talk about how Trump is a disruptive candidate and how people will be afraid of having another Trump. What is the warrant? People like Trump. A lot of people like Trump. That's why he was elected in America, right? We think that there are large populations in the United States that they're just ignoring. They're just saying the entire Rust Belt, middle America, just doesn't exist. This is just a completely unwarranted argument. They're going to say that everybody's going to think that he's bad. No, some people think he's good now, yes.
What do you think about Donald Trump having a approval rating that is now down to 30%?
So that's still 30% of America. That's a lot of people. Also, it's not 30%. It's like 38%. 3, they talk about minority groups. They talk about how the countries, oppressed groups, are coming together. We're going to turn this argument. Before that, they actually have no warrants, so you should throw this argument out in the trash. But, yeah, so we're going to turn this argument. We think that Trump polarizes oppressed groups, because at the moment in which some oppressed groups of society, like Trump, like, for example, a lot of women voted for Trump, right, but they voted for a person who uses otherizing rhetoric when talking about, for example, illegal immigrants. So oppressed groups still voted for Trump based on otherizing rhetoric, which means that he's polarizing oppressed groups. Turn this argument. Okay, yeah, the neg case is really bad. Let's go to the AF framework. They talk about how the neg case will always outweigh because of impacts to the future. Well, the white ruling class promised slaves rights in the future. That didn't really happen for a long time. Also, the AF impacts is death and loss of life, which probably outweighs any BS impacts they're saying Trump causes in the future. I'm not supposed to swear. Okay. And extinction, yeah. The first point is about economy. Their response, if I'm correct, was, we've been on the brink of economic collapse for years. No. We're recovering from an economic collapse, not on the brink of an economic collapse. I don't know where they're getting this from. Extend all 6 of our warrants about how the Dow was the lowest in years after Trump was elected, about how 2, Trump has increased the mortgage income tax, about 3, how the IMF, which is a U.S. organization, downgraded the quality and rating of the U.S. economy for the travel ban, and how foreign investment decreased directly after, 5, the Dakota Access Pipeline killed U.S. Steel, 6, about how consumer sentiment and trust and confidence in the economy is at all-time lows. Then the impacts about the negative feedback loop. The more consumer confidence decreases, the more investor and business confidence decreases. This is a recursive cycle that eventually leads to economic collapse. Look to the example of the collapse of 1993, in which a similar situation happened. They have no response to any of the warrants there. 2, on the social argument. They say that groups are coming together. Like, no, dude, they're not. Extend 3 warrants here about anti-blackness, feminism, and queerness. Trump is oppressing the queer body. How is it a good long-term impact that he's banning transgender people from the military? I would really like a response to that. Also, cross-apply the argument about how he polarizes oppressed groups because groups like women vote for Trump based on the otherizing rhetoric he talks about illegal immigrants. That's good. Yeah, the racist groups are coming together. Like, no, there's so much uniqueness to say, like, what they're saying is just so false, right? 3, we talk about environment. This is what we're largely going to be going for in today's debate. They say that environmental collapse is inevitable. Like, no, it's not. Even if you believe that's true, they concede all analysis that Trump probably makes that environmental collapse quicker. How is that good for long-term impacts? I'm very confused as to how Trump literally increasing the amount of time the human race, or rather, sorry, decreasing the amount of time the human race has on the Earth, a good thing. We make the argument that it's probably not, and there are 4 warrants why. The first is the Dakota Access Pipeline, how it not only violates Standing Rock Sioux tribe land, but it also has already had 13 leaks. We make the argument about methane. We talk about how Trump revoked the requirement that companies have to report methane. We literally don't know how much companies are polluting anymore because of Trump. 3, Trump revoked the freeze on permits for coal-fired power plants near at-risk populations, populations that are more likely to be at risk for things like lung cancer, all of which are caused by coal-fired power plants. Probably not good. And even if you don't believe that, and even if you believe that the environmental collapse is inevitable, it's probably a bad thing to put a bunch of coal-fired power plants near people who are more susceptible to death by coal-fired power plants. 4. The Paris Agreement. Trump pulled out of it. This is a really, really bad thing, because not only does the world no longer respect Trump's environmental policy, also, we're not promising to reduce methane emissions, we're not promising to reduce carbon emissions, all of which will probably extend the amount of time the human race has on this Earth, and thus increase the amount of time we have to get off the planet. Right? That is the extinction scenario. The smaller amount of time the human race has on Earth, the less capacity and chance we have for getting off before we die. That is the most important impact in the round. He's not good for the future if he's causing extinction. The orange man is bad. Vote out. And then the last one.
The last one.
Yeah.
What's the order?
Yeah, we're gonna be going like Gov.
You mean like advantages and stuff?
No, sorry, AFNEG.
Okay.
Yeah, not Gov. Okay.
So are you gonna do app framework on top? Or like framework on top?
No, I don't think we have any framework contentions.
Okay, cool.
Yep. Yeah, just like off time, we concede all framework. We're good with net benefits and everything else.
Awesome. Okay,
Great.
cool.
Yep. All right, 1 second. Will do. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am here to strongly negate the resolution that Donald Trump's presidency has done more harm than good. And let's go into why. We believe here on side negative that something good can come of something bad, and that the platform that our opponents on side government proposes takes into account only the short-term harms of the past 6 months and not the vast electoral change that will become of American society in the next 100 or so years. We believe that because of the Trump presidency, vast reforms will be implemented that will change the political system, will change the minds of voters and how people make decisions, but ultimately change how people are going to advocate for the causes that they are believe in. For these reasons, we believe that the impacts of our side of the next 100 years and of the structure that we are trying to reform, for this reason, Donald Trump has greatly increased the United States' capacity to function, and actually will improve the United States in the long term, and the impacts of the past 6 months do not stand. So with that, I would like to launch into the government's case. The first contention is that of economic impacts, and this is really the only contention that I believe we have to interact with in order to win this debate. So they say that the Dow hit the lowest point in their history ever after Donald Trump was elected president, but they completely neglect the fact that the Dow Jones Industrial Average, while Donald Trump was in office, hit for the first time over 21,000 points. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is a volatile metric of the stock market system, as, investor confidence has not necessarily gone down because of Trump. This is not, you can't equate the two. The Dow Jones Industrial Average has bounced up and down, up and down, up and down, as it did under the Obama presidency and under other administrations in the past. It's hit all-time lows and highs under the Trump administration, but we believe this is fundamentally non-unique because it is a volatile metric. Yes?
So, let's say if we're all dead, right?
Yeah.
Do you think changes in 100 years will matter?
Not necessarily. We don't believe we'll be dead, though. All right, on to your second point, which is that of tax reform. And we once again, we'd like to address your warrant of tax reform and Trump-specific tax reform, and saying we cannot predict these harms in short terms. Policies change with different presidents. The mortgage system, this has changed several times over. But we cannot ultimately predict. You make all sorts of nuanced analysis about how this is going to be back to the American economy, but ultimately we cannot evaluate this in the short term. We believe the majority of his economic impacts have been overwhelming positive on the part of the United States. He hasn't really tampered with the economic system. And for this reason, the majority of your arguments really fall into the volatility category and shouldn't be analyzed in this debate. Furthermore, you talk about the Dakota Access Pipeline, saying that we're screwed because of steel. Madam Speaker, we believe this argument is non-unique. Steel's been screwed in the United States for the past 50 years. These coal steel jobs, they aren't coming back. They never were when the Trump presidency came into effect. Please write these off the flow. Don't evaluate them. Furthermore, on to the last one, which is that of lack of foreign investment. They offer no statistics or evidence to back this up. We don't believe that there has been a lack of foreign investment. Furthermore, we believe that consumption is at an all-time high, and you should write these arguments off the flow. On to the second point of side government, which is that of social issues. Once again, they say that Donald Trump has otherized certain groups of people, and their rhetoric, his rhetoric, has polarized people, ostracizing them, and for this reason, it is extraordinarily bad for American society. Please cross-apply all the evidence that my colleague brought up under our second contention and turn their argument on this basis. Yes, Donald Trump has other groups, but under feminism, the queer society, and the trans-military groups that they're talking about, we believe that Trump has brought solidarity to these groups, and ultimately, these groups were advocating for what were entirely separate aims before his administration, right? But because the Trump administration has come in, we would like you to turn this, because people have been so upset that they have united behind a common platform of social change. They have been so upset that these people have ultimately decided... What's it say? Oh yeah, thank you. These people have ultimately united behind a platform of common issues that are similar to them that otherwise were not. Feminism and the queer movement were advocating for entirely separate paths until Trump gave them some reason to rally behind a common thing and advocate for solidarity. Furthermore, racism existed entirely before the Trump administration came to power. Racism was in existence before the Trump administration came to power. I repeat that once again because the socialist issues that they're talking about, many of these, this is called this has allowed the feminist movement along with the queer movement and other of these movements to use the media as a platform to form advocacy for their issues, right? This has caused a lot of attention to racism that existed beforehand, but Donald Trump hasn't necessarily exacerbated racism, even if you do believe that impact. This has caused, once again, vast media attention. His approval ratings are extraordinarily low, and people are generally opposed to the comments that he has been making, as opposed to the racist front. So for this reason, we would like you to write this off. Furthermore, they talk about value to life, and this is a really big impact that I think that we should be weighing under their social issues contention, right? Donald Trump's moral bankruptcy is ultimately aligned the morals of most American people because people are very upset with Donald Trump. I think that we can all be in general consensus with this because he has a very low approval rating overall, and because of this low approval rating and how people are so just they abhor his morals and they want to diametrically oppose themselves to these morals, they say that this has ultimately created a bad value to life, right? But we believe that this isn't necessarily true. Yes, Donald Trump has in the short term reduced value to life, but really we need to ask ourselves why has this happened and why at this time, right? In what past instances has value to life been threatened? And we believe that in instances where value to life is most threatened, people are going to rally behind this. They're going to see that value to life is being threatened, and they aren't going to vote in other contrarian politicians. They are going to enact vast societal reform, as my colleague pointed out, under our three contentions, that is going to further better the value of life. If Trump were not here to point out to people the harms that he's been doing to people's value of life, in the small instances where this occurs, we do not believe that this issue would be solved in the long run. For this reason, I would like to launch into the third contention of side government, which is the point of the environment. Once again, Madam Speaker, we believe that this is an entirely inevitable and non-unique argument, and for this reason to be written off the floor. I'd like to address two of their warrants in particular because we don't believe this contention is very important. The first of which being the Paris Climate Accords. And we believe that, once again, the Paris Climate Accords really, offered no enforcement mechanism. It was trivial. It did nothing to improve the environment. Trump simply pulling out of it. This was not a piece of legislation that was going to reverse the effects of climate change nor slow them. We also don't believe that they have proven how Donald Trump has significantly worsened or exacerbated the effects of climate change on the human race such that it would lead to extinction. This is not the point of the round. We should not be arguing under the framework of the environment because we believe that ultimately this is a non-unique argument and we cannot be talking about it. Same applies for global warming, non-unique. Please write this off. Now on to our case, but first, yes.
So you say that everybody will realize Trump is bad and be like, hey, let's not vote for somebody like him?
Yeah, it's already happened.
But in Nazi Germany, why did they not say, hey, Hitler's rising to power, probably a bad guy?
Nazi Germany is an autocracy, dude. You can't compare the two. Apples and oranges, apples and oranges. Onto their case, or onto our case. So, onto our first contention, which is that this will expose the shortcomings in the American political system. They cite the examples of Bush versus the United States, Bush v. Gore in the electoral college system beforehand, and for this reason our contention must fall. But I'd like to contest this. No, this is not the case. Never in our society's history have we had people more involved in the political process than before this instance. People have exposed shortcomings have been exposed in the American political system, and people have diametrically opposed themselves to this in a way that has never happened before. People want reform. People have expressed this vehemently, and they've used media as an outlet to allow this to happen, and they've said that they want entire societal reform. Furthermore, they attack our points on anarchy and communism, but ultimately we are advocating for is a reform of democracy. We are saying that both of these ideologies they could draw from them. We were not advocating for them in any way. So for this reason, please write the arguments off the flow. On to our second contention, which is that of change in the mind of voters. People have never been more involved with the electoral process than in our nation's history. And furthermore, because Donald Trump has increased advocacy of many groups, we believe that he has indeed caused more harm than good in the long run. I urge a strong negative ballot. Thank you.
Okay, everyone good?
Give me a second, actually. I'm good now.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Well, so I'm going to start off. So first of all, I'm going to talk about all the individual points in this debate, and then I'm going to talk about the debate as a whole, why we won this round. So, first of all, talking about our opponents' arguments in general. So, as we've said multiple times, something pretty much ignored by our opponents is about long-term effects, and how these are completely more significant than all these short-term effects. Sure, they said, what if we're all dead, this will lead, what if this leads to even worse long-term effects? Well, we have to say to this, the only argument they have to do with everybody being dead is the environment point. As we said, this is inevitable anyway. They responded with, but all of our deaths will happen faster. We fundamentally don't believe the human race is going to go extinct from the environment. We don't think that is going to happen. We are going to find out. That's how it works.
The argumentation that we're going to be finding out after environmental collapse is the argumentation that could have been made in either the speech that you had right after my speech or the speech that you just had. This is the argumentation.
What's the specific thing he's saying that's new?
That humans will find a way out of environmental collapse using technology stuff. That argument was just not made.
Well, what's your response to that?
My colleague brought up that we don't believe that everybody's going to die. So we fundamentally don't believe in this debate that the environment point stands ground, because we don't think on our side of the debate, no matter what you believe, that all humans are going to die. We don't believe they're going to go extinct, and just because our opponents think Donald Trump is bringing the collapse faster, we don't believe that this is inevitable, this is going to happen. So we're going to look at this debate as a whole. Look at our side of the house. I have to ask a question of every single one of you in this room. Since Donald Trump has been elected, how much of the media have you been looking about politics? How much have you been looking at his decisions, about what he's done? How much have you learned about how the government works in general? About talking about the morals of the presidency's actions? Okay? This is unprecedented. This is an unprecedented point in history that will shape us for the next 100 years. Okay? This is something that is extremely crucial in this debate. Because even though our opponents said, we talked during President Obama, no, this is unprecedented. This is talking...
Point of order, stop time. The argumentation that the argumentation that after Obama's presidency we saw the same numbers of people going and watching the news because the first black president was elected is an argument that was dropped by the MO made by the MGs. In your articulation in the rebuttal, there should be dropped in the floor.
My partner brought up that this is an unprecedented point in history, and no matter what before this, people are talking about it more.
The word Obama was never said by the MO.
Fine.
Okay, well, we'll take into consideration. You can crossify, yeah.
Okay. Obama's presidency is included in everything before this. This being an unprecedented event says that everything beforehand, this is unprecedented. Everybody's talking about presidency morals, the morals of the government, and how everybody should act. This is something talked about. More and more, and we believe that this is inherently one of the most important arguments in this debate, because this is everybody. This is the people. As I brought up in my first speech, this is really people really getting a moral compass on what should happen. This is people coming together and believing something together as people. This is Donald Trump being a broken moral compass, and we can see where we should be and where he is right now. So on our side of the house, we see this is one of the most important arguments of the debate that our opponents really haven't grasped. They just said, who cares, whatever, people aren't actually caring. This is something unprecedented. This is people actually believing in something and talking about politics, learning about politics, being more rational, being more educated. We believe, honestly, that we will not have another Donald Trump in the future. This is not something that's going to happen. On our side of the house, really think about it. After people seeing what Donald Trump has done, his approval ratings have gone down over 20%, okay? This is currently at, as even our opponent said, 38% generally. But this has been going down the last 6 months of his presidency. He's 6 months into his 4-year term. We don't know what approval rating he's going to be at the end of this, and this just fundamentally proves that people aren't okay with what he's doing. More and more people are not okay with what he's doing, and this is changing the mind of voters. This is changing the minds of our society. This is people coming together under Donald Trump and changing what we believe should our government be like. Who should we have in charge of our government? What should we do about our government? What should we do about the glaring holes and problems in our government? We believe these holes and these problems that Donald Trump is pointing out in the government is why we win this debate. Because overall, in the long term, we're talking about hundreds of years, these environmental issues, these economic issues, and these problems about otherizing just simply don't stand. We've talked about our side of the house about how this is actually bringing advocacy groups together and how racism existed beforehand, and this is this is actually making people come together, and how this isn't actually increasing more racism in the first place. This is people coming together, becoming better with their morals, becoming more educated, with a better voter system, be able to reform our entire government. So this is what we need to ask in this debate overall. Which side, at the end of the day, has long-lasting impacts that will affect us, affect the most amount of people? Which side has the most significant impacts in the round? We can see on our opponent's side, they talk about short-term economic impacts, short-term otherizing impacts, and short-term environmental impacts. All of these are short-term compared to the next couple hundreds of years that we're talking about our global system of government, how the entire world looks at this. So overall, Donald Trump has changed how everybody thinks as voters, how everybody thinks politically and governmentally. We believe in our side of the house, he's changed everyone for the better because he has fundamentally proved what people shouldn't do, and everyone will look to him and say, what would I do? What would I do better? And that is how people will become better people. That is how people will actually create a government and a system that works better than the status quo, which is more significant than anything our opponents have brought to the table. Thank you.
Alright, is everybody ready? So again, before I start my time, I'd like to thank everyone for being here, make this day possible. Let's jump right in. A majority of people in Germany right now are not Nazis, but was the Holocaust worth it? That's the question that you should be asking yourself when you're evaluating this debate. Sure, maybe long-term we'll be able to resolve these issues, but is the long-term resolution of these impacts that we don't necessarily know is actually going to be resolved because apparently it's hundreds of years in the future, outweigh the very structural and proximal oppression of individuals that is happening in the short term that they concede? The MO says that sure, people are losing value to life now. So should we let people lose value to life now on a false promise that 100 years in the future it's going to be all better? We say no, and as the affirmation side, we believe that is why you should evaluate the short-term proximal impacts. But with that in mind, let's go into the main negation arguments, which they have two of. So they say that their main argument is that people are engaging with the news right now. People are watching politics. People are watching this at an unprecedented number. The first argument that Devin makes is that they literally have no warrant. They don't tell you how many people are watching it. They just generally say more people are watching it. And then they concede the argument that after Obama's election, people were watching the news too. Generally, after each president's election, people are curious about the news because they're curious on what the new president is doing, which means that they haven't responded to this fundamental question. But secondarily, they don't even have an impact to why people watching the news is good. Their main impact is anarchism and communism. But then in the MO, they say, no, it's just generic democratic change. Generic democratic change is not going to outweigh any of the affirmation impacts, especially if it's 100 years in the future, which means they don't have any impact to their first their contention. That goes away. Secondarily, they say that people are coming together, and that's the reason to vote for them. But they're conceding the people who are coming together are Milo Yiannopoulos and a bunch of other alt-right people, right? These are people who are racist who are coming together. Sure, they may be polarizing the left side, but they're also polarizing the right side, which causes violence. Why are we having riots in Charlottesville right now? Why is this happening? It's because after Trump was elected, the left got more far left and the right got more far right. And that is the point that they're not bringing to your attention. This creates conflict and creates the violence that we're trying to stop in the status quo. And that is why we're going to be winning. But let's go into the main voter issue of the negations, affirmation side, which is that the environment will outweigh. They say that environmental collapse is inevitable. If that is true, then there's no reason to vote negation, because the environment would have collapsed by the time any of their impacts that are happening hundreds of years in the future will happen. So right off the bat, you can vote out the negation. But we say that it is not inevitable. The warrant here that they concede is that right now we are at 400 parts per million, and the point of no return is 440 parts per million. This is an argument I make in my first speech very clearly that they concede, which means we are not at the point of no return. This is an unwarranted, fallacious argument, which means that if we can solve for the extinction right now, that would be the biggest magnitude impact and would be a reason to prefer the affirmation. On the environment advantage, when they're conceding arguments that Trump right now is increasing methane emissions, and methane is 10 times worse than carbon dioxide, and methane results in biodiversity collapse, and when they're conceding arguments that the new pipeline that Trump has just put in is already leaked 13 times, which is killing regional biodiversity, and that biodiversity collapse leads to extinction, that is a world in which the negation will always be losing the round, because they say that none of our impacts, what was the exact quote? None of our impacts are long-lasting and affect most people. I think that extinction is pretty long-lasting and affects 100% of the population, which generally means that this is an easy place for you to write your ballot. Okay, look to the fact that and let's say you buy extinction is not going to happen, right? Or actually, what's the argument that they make? Oh, extinction is inevitable. If extinction is inevitable, that means that their long-term impacts and our long-term impacts don't matter. But they concede that people are losing value to life in the short term. The MO himself says this, that sure, people are losing value to life in the short term. Direct quote. Which means that obviously people who are losing value to life right now will outweigh the fact that people maybe in the future might have value to life. Remember, the argument that we make that this kind of resolves to is that white slave owners making false promises to slaves, saying that, oh, don't worry, in the future things will be all right, which justifies the atrocities that they're committing against the people right now. That is a reason to evaluate our framework, and if we win the framework, we win the debate, because the only argument that comes out of the negation side that has any sort of grit is the fact that if we have long-term impacts that are better, we will win. So, with the last minute of my speech, let's go over a bunch of things that Trump is better, well, things that are better than Trump. We spent a long time making this list, we hope you enjoy it. Gas station sushi. Unwashed 3-week-old Burks. I think we can all agree with that. Abrasive Uber drivers. The new iPhone 7 aux cord. Crocs. Crocs with giblets. Crocs with giblets only on the right foot. Salads. Steve Harvey's 2016 Miss Universe fail. Fidget spinners. And finally, Hillary Clinton. And for all those reasons, we are just strong affirmation vote in today's debate. Thank you so much for listening to me.